When you go to the doctor for, like, a broken arm, there is a certain comfort in the precision of it all.
Oh, absolutely. It's very visible.
Right. They take an x-ray, you see that jagged white line on the screen, and the doctor just points and says, there it is, that's the problem.
Yeah, it's binary. Clean.
Exactly. But then you step into the world of early pregnancy and reproductive health, and suddenly that x-ray machine is, well, it's completely useless.
It really is.
When an early pregnancy is lost, you're so often met with these incredibly vague explanations. You hear things like, well, it was just one of those things, or it was probably just a chromosomal abnormality.
Which is incredibly frustrating for patients.
Oh, I mean, it leaves this massive void of information. Even if chromosomes are a factor, it treats the whole process like this impenetrable black box where things either magically work or they just don't.
Right.
So today, for you, our listener, we are opening that box. Our mission for this deep dive is to look past those dismissive, catch-all explanations and explore the highly specific, deeply physical microenvironment of early pregnancy.
Because it is the absolute definition of a medical black box for most people, we tend to think of early pregnancy as this abstract, purely hormonal event.
Right. You take a test, the hormones are there, and you just wait.
Exactly. But our source material today proves that it is deeply mechanical. It's structural. We're looking at this extensive research review from the Berkeley Center for Reproductive Wellness, and it zeroes in on oxygen, blood flow, and the actual biological mechanisms of acupuncture and pregnancy support.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sheer vascular engineering of early pregnancy is what completely shifted my perspective.
It's an engineering marvel.
It really is, but a highly precarious one.
Yeah, and understand why pregnancies sometimes fail at this microscopic level. We first have to understand the temporary life support system, the one that operates before the actual permanent infrastructure, the placenta, is even ready to function.
Because the placenta doesn't just, switch on the day you get a positive test, right?
No, not at all. It takes weeks.
See, I always pictured the placenta forming instantly, but the reality is much more piecemeal.
Very piecemeal.
Yeah.
In those very first few weeks, the heavy lifting is actually being done by a structure called the yolk sac.
Okay.
If you were to look at a very early ultrasound, say around 5 to 6 weeks, you wouldn't see a recognizable fetus or a mature placenta. You'd see this small, distinct fluid-filled ring.
And that's the yolk sac.
That's the yolk sac.
Yeah.
And before the placenta is fully formed, this little sac is the primary life support system. Because the embryo's bone marrow hasn't developed yet, the yolk sac is literally manufacture the first early red blood cells. Yeah, it's synthesizing proteins, transferring essential nutrients. It handles all the critical, life-sustaining work while the placenta is still under construction.
The best way I can picture this is it's like a massive skyscraper construction site.
Okay, I like that.
The yolk sac is the heavy-duty emergency backup generator sitting out back. It's humming away, keeping the lights on and the air circulating in the temporary offices, while the main electrical grid, which would be the placenta, is being carefully wired and connected to the city's power supply.
That is a brilliant analogy. And wiring that main grid is an incredibly delicate physical process.
How so?
Well, the placenta develops through these tiny finger-like projections called villi. These villi have to physically burrow their way deep into the lining of the uterus.
Just literally digging in.
Literally digging, reaching out to gradually connect with the mother's blood vessels. It is a slow, structural integration that requires a highly specific internal environment.
And that internal environment, this is the part of the research that forced me to reread the paragraph twice. It completely defies our most basic assumptions about human biology.
It really does. Because in a completely normal, healthy, early pregnancy, the environment is supposed to be heavily restricted from oxygen.
Which is wild.
It is naturally a hypoxic environment.
Wait. We need oxygen to survive. I mean, our cells need it to divide and produce energy. How can starving a rapidly developing embryo of oxygen be a biological requirement?
I know it sounds totally counterintuitive, but it's biology working exactly as intended.
Okay, explain that.
For roughly the first 10 to 12 weeks of pregnancy, the maternal blood vessels that will eventually feed the placenta are actively, physically plugged.
Plugged by what?
By cells from the developing placenta itself. They're called trophoblasts. They invade the mother's arteries and literally form biological stoppers inside them.
They block the vessels.
Yes, they completely block them.
So the baby's own developing organ is playing defense against the mother's blood supply.
Precisely. And there's a very good reason for it. The early embryo and the newly forming placental tissue are exquisitely sensitive to oxygen-related molecular byproducts.
Are these the free radicals?
Exactly, the oxygen-free radicals. Oxidative stress happens when there are too many of these highly reactive free radicals and not enough antioxidants to neutralize them.
Like when iron rusts.
Yes. Or think of an apple turning brown when you leave it sliced on the counter. That is oxidative damage occurring at a cellular level.
So it's basically cellular rust.
Right. Free radicals steal electrons from healthy cells, causing a chain reaction of damage.
So if a surge of oxygen-rich maternal blood arrives too early, before the tissue is mature enough to handle it, it essentially rusts or damages the delicate, newly forming placental cells.
That's exactly what happens, and the scientific community have hard proof of this mechanism. Researchers didn't just theorize this, they actually measured it.
How do you measure that?
They used specialized probes to check the particle pressure of oxygen inside the early gestational sac versus the surrounding uterine tissue.
And what did they find?
They found a stark gradient. The inside of the sac was drastically lower in oxygen. They proved that this physiological low oxygen state is absolutely necessary. It acts as a shield against those damaging oxygen-free radicals.
Ensuring normal placental tissue growth in those vulnerable first weeks.
Exactly.
So if the baby is essentially building its own plug to keep oxygen away, then the real issue isn't a lack of oxygen early on. The massive structural disruption happens when the timing of that blood flow gets thrown off.
Which brings us to the vascular problem of miscarriage. It operates on a spectrum of flow.
Okay, let's break down that spectrum.
On one end of the spectrum, we have what we just touched on, too much blood flow too soon.
Meaning the plugs dissolve early.
Yes. The connection between the placenta and the uterine lining is poorly developed, the trophoblastic plugs fail prematurely, and maternal blood surges into a placenta that simply isn't structurally or biochemically ready for it.
And that causes the cellular rust we talked about.
Massive oxidative damage. It overwhelms the cellular defenses. The research notes that this pattern of early excessive disorganized blood flow shows up across miscarriages of many different underlying causes.
Wow.
It acts as a final common pathway for a lot of early pregnancy losses.
And then the other end of the spectrum is true insufficiency, right? Where the blood flow is restricted when it shouldn't be.
Yes. This happens when the small spiral arteries in the uterine lining fail to undergo a critical biological process called remodeling.
Remodeling. What does that actually look like at a cellular level? Because if the issue is restricted flow, it sounds like the artery itself is fundamentally flawed.
It's actually a fascinating biological takeover. In a healthy pregnancy, those invading placental cells, the trophoblasts, they don't just plug the arteries.
What else do?
They eventually dismantle the muscular walls of the mother's blood vessels.
Wait, they dismantle the mother's arteries?
Yes. Normal arteries have smooth muscle in their walls that allows them to constrict and dilate. They pulse. But the placenta needs a massive, steady, passive volume of blood.
So pulsing is bad.
Right. So the invading cells actually replace the smooth muscle and the endothelial lining of the maternal spiral arteries.
They are literally rewiring the mother's circulatory system so the vessels lose their ability to clamp down.
Exactly. They transform from tight, muscular, high-resistance vessels into wide, passive, low-resistance funnels.
But what if they don't?
If that remodeling fails, like if the invading cells don't penetrate deep enough or the muscle isn't replaced, those arteries stay narrow.
And they keep their muscle.
Yes. They remain responsive to stimuli, meaning they can still twitch and constrict. So the blood flow into the placental bed remains highly resistant and wildly inconsistent.
This makes me think of a gardening analogy just scaled down to a microscopic level.
Let's hear it.
You're trying to water a very fragile, newly sprouted seedling. If you blast that seedling with a high-pressure fire hose, which is the too much too soon scenario where the protective plugs fail, you obliterate the plant.
You'd tear up the roots.
Right, the roots are torn up by the sheer mechanical force. But if your hose is severely kinked, the insufficiency scenario where the arteries fail to remodel and shed their muscle, the water only comes out in random, tight drips, and the seedling starves.
That's a great way to visualize it.
What that biological tissue needs is a perfectly paced, highly regulated supply to thrive.
That supply regulation is vital, and the consequences of it failing are measurable in real time. Researchers actually look directly at women experiencing first trimester bleeding.
Which is often an external symptom of this microscopic stress, right?
Yes, it's often a sign of a placenta or yolk sac under oxidative stress. They compared women with light vaginal bleeding in early pregnancy to women with uncomplicated pregnancies.
Let me guess. They took blood samples, and the women experiencing bleeding had completely different systemic biochemistry?
Spot on.
Yeah.
They specifically measured markers that act as a chemical footprint left behind by oxidative damage.
And they found a difference.
A huge difference. The bleeding group had significantly higher markers of oxidative stress, and it significantly lowered total antioxidant capacity in their blood.
So their bodies were actively losing the battle against those free radicals.
Exactly. It provides direct biochemical evidence that this invisible oxidative imbalance is actively occurring in patients experiencing early complications.
Okay, so if the core issue is a stiff, unremodeled artery buried deep inside the uterine lining, the obvious medical question is, how on earth do you access an internal vessel to force it to dilate without surgery?
And this is where modern reproductive research points to a really unexpected intervention, one that integrates Eastern methodology with Western physiological measurement.
You're talking about acupuncture.
Yes, acupuncture.
Okay, wait. Sticking a tiny needle into someone's leg or lower back to change how blood flows deep inside the uterus? I mean, that sounds like a massive leap of faith.
It does sound like a leap.
How can a needle on the surface of the skin impact deep vascular resistance?
Well, it sounds like magic until you look at the mechanism, which is rooted purely in basic neurology and vascular physiology.
Okay, walk me through it.
Acupuncture's most consistently demonstrated physiological effect in reproductive research is its ability to reduce blood flow resistance in the uterine arteries.
They've actually proven this.
Oh, yeah. Researchers didn't just ask patients how they felt after a session. They measured the physical blood flow. They used transvaginal Doppler ultrasounds to measure vascular resistance in the uterine arteries of women before, during, and after electroacupuncture treatments.
So they attached mild electrical stimulation to the needles and could actually watch the blood flow change on the ultrasound monitor in real time.
Yes. They observed a sustained, statistically significant reduction in vascular resistance in the treated group.
Wow.
The arteries visibly relaxed and allowed more flow.
But the mechanism is what I really want to understand. How does a sensory stimulus on the skin communicate with an artery in the pelvis?
It all comes down to the sympathetic nervous system.
The fight or flight response.
Exactly. When your sympathetic nervous system is active, its primary job is survival. It tightly constricts the blood vessels in your internal organs, including your uterus, to push blood out to your skeletal muscles so you can run from a perceived threat.
So in plain English, acupuncture is just turning down the volume dial on our stress response.
That's exactly what it's doing. The needles stimulate specific sensory nerves under the skin. These nerves send messages up to the spinal cord and the brain, which in turn inhibits sympathetic outflow.
It tells the brain to chill out.
Right. Studies suggest that acupuncture actively decreases the background activity in these specific nerve fibers.
So you're sending a physical signal to the central nervous system to stand down. And by down-regulating that fight or flight reflex, you stop the body from constantly clamping down on its own blood vessels.
Exactly. A relaxed vascular system allows blood to reach the uterus and the forming placental bed much more steadily.
Which solves the king toes problem.
It directly combats the undersupply problem caused by stiff arteries, and it helps stabilize the overall vascular environment to prevent those sudden, overwhelming surges.
I mean, the science is incredible, but it isn't just confined to research papers. We see this actively applied in clinical settings, like the Berkeley Center for Reproductive Wellness in Manhattan.
Yes, Mike Berkeley founded the clinic back in 1997. And his origin story is really a testament to observing these physiological shifts in real life.
Yeah, the source material mentioned a specific patient.
Right. He was working with a 42-year-old patient who had been told by her traditional doctors that her chances of conceiving and carrying a child were incredibly slim.
But he treated her anyway.
He treated her with targeted acupuncture protocols. She achieved a successful, healthy pregnancy, and that single outcome essentially altered the trajectory of his career.
Wow.
He decided to dedicate his entire clinical focus to this exact intersection of complementary medicine and reproductive endocrinology.
What's really compelling about his work isn't just that he opened a clinic, but how that clinic integrates into modern fertility care. I mean, in 1997, treating fertility primarily through acupuncture was pretty outside the mainstream in the U.S.
Okay.
But today, Berkeley is a licensed acupuncturist and a fellow of the American Board of Oriental Reproductive Medicine, and his entire model relies on working collaboratively with OBGYNs and reproductive endocrinologists.
And that collaborative integration is where patient care genuinely advances. The patients seeking this care are often dealing with complex, emotionally taxing diagnoses.
Like unexplained infertility, recurrent pregnancy loss.
Exactly. Diminished ovarian reserve, endometriosis. They are frequently referred directly by leading fertility centers.
Because the physicians at those centers recognize the immense value of pairing traditional reproductive interventions with evidence-informed vascular support.
Right. It perfectly illustrates the seed and soil concept of reproductive health.
I love that concept. Let's explain that for the listener.
The underlying philosophy is that the physiological soil, meaning the circulatory environment, the precise oxygen levels, the structural integrity of the uterine lining, matters just as much as the seed, which is the embryo itself.
Right. You utilize cutting-edge medical interventions like IVF to create and transfer the healthiest possible seed, and you utilize targeted therapies like acupuncture to prep the soil.
Exactly. For instance, a patient undergoing an embryo transfer might have acupuncture sessions scheduled strategically around the transfer date.
Specifically to optimize uterine blood flow and lower vascular resistance at the exact critical window of implantation.
Yes. It is ultimately about creating the optimal environment for biology to do what it naturally wants to do.
It's a scientifically grounded strategy targeting the exact microscopic vulnerabilities we just spent the last 20 minutes exploring.
Because if uterine blood flow is the single biggest physical determinant of how much oxygen reaches that yolk sac and how successfully those tiny villi can anchor,
Then optimizing that flow is a completely logical, necessary step in comprehensive patient care.
absolutely.
Well, we have covered some serious ground today. To wrap this up, let's just look at the incredible journey we just took through the human body.
It's quite a trip.
We started with the unsung heroics of the yolk sac, acting as that early backup generator and blood cell manufacturer.
Right.
Then we navigated the bizarre reality of the oxygen paradox, where the developing tissue literally plugs the mother's arteries to keep toxic oxygen-free radicals away.
Biological stoppers.
Yeah. Then we explored the cellular battleground of the spiral arteries, where invading cells must dismantle muscular vessel walls to ensure a steady, regulated flow.
Shedding that muscle.
And finally, we unpack the mechanism of acupuncture, seeing how stimulating sensory nerves can convince the central nervous system to unclench our internal blood vessels.
It really reframes early pregnancy from a passive waiting game into an active, dynamic, highly vascular event.
It really does.
And, looking at all this raises an important question, something not explicitly in the text, but impossible to ignore given everything we've discussed about the sympathetic nervous system.
Oh, I like where this is going. What's the question?
Well, if acupuncture works by calming our baseline fight-or-flight response to physically unclench our blood vessels and allow a pregnancy to thrive, what does that say about the environments we live in?
Oh, wow.
What does it say about how our modern, chronically stressed, high-anxiety lifestyles might be invisibly constricting our vascular health before we even attempt to grow a family?
That is a great point.
If our daily baseline is a state of chronic sympathetic nervous system arousal, what kind of restricted, highly resistant soil are we asking these seeds to grow in?
Wow. Are we walking around with our internal circulatory hoses permanently kinked just by virtue of surviving modern life?
It's very possible.
That is a heavy, completely fascinating thought to chew on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. The next time someone tells you an early pregnancy loss was just one of those things, remember the yolk sac.
Remember the spiral arteries.
Keep questioning, keep looking past the black box, and never underestimate the amazing, fragile mechanics of the human body. See you next time.